Hello everyone and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah and today we are talking about sleep. Some good sleep tips and evening routine. However, we are going to address this from the perspective of a night owl with insomnia. And I didn't put it in the title, but I'm also a bit of a workaholic. So with this in mind, even despite some of these challenges and having a different sleep schedule than many other people, I have found something that works for me, and I am going to be sharing that today. Now, I do think these tips can apply even if you don't have insomnia or even if you don't have, if you're not a night owl and you go to bed a lot earlier. But I do want to share these from my experience just because my own perception, since I've watched a lot of the videos in the past about getting better sleep, they're not really, connecting or pertaining to night owls and those who just naturally have a tougher time sleeping or are people who are staying up later. So I wanted to really, make this for those people just because, there's not as much out there about that, but, there's nothing wrong if that's the way we are. So I wanted to share these tips. They will be divided into two categories. The tips for before you sleep, sort of evening routine preparations that will help you be more successful when you're sleeping, as well as things that you can do specifically when you are trying to sleep or setting up the bedroom environment to have a better night of sleep. So let's jump right in. The first tip, and one of the most important, I think, especially for night owls or those with insomnia, is to accept yourself as your true self and not try to change who you are. For a long time, I was trying to fight just my natural instincts and energy and really trying to force myself to go to bed earlier or to wake up earlier so I could get on, a more normal routine. But what I found is when I was trying to do that, I was overall just getting much lower quality sleep, or I would try to go to bed earlier, lay there for 2 hours, not tired at all, get back up, and then because I had laid down in bed for 2 hours, my sleep schedule got even worse and I went to bed maybe at 6 a.m. It was just a nightmare. And I even also tried phases where let me try to wake up really early, 6 in the morning, and that didn't work for me either because I just felt miserable and groggy all day. And yet my energy was still really high at night despite sleeping very little. So for me, it's been so important to just accept that this is who I am. I've always been this way. And in a way, I think it can be kind of a superpower. Unfortunately, it's not ideal in today's world, depending on job stuff. I know my 5 years as a teacher, having to start the day very early, were pretty low sleep years. But I think it's important to just overall accept ourselves and the way we work. Tip number 2 is to track your sleep. I think this can be incredibly helpful to know what time we're going to bed, what time we're waking up, and if you do wish to invest in some sort of tracker, these can be on different watches and there's other health-related tools. Of course, that's not a requirement, but I will say when I started wearing my Fitbit, it does track sleep. I mostly got it to track my steps to make sure I'm moving enough during the day, but I was actually stunned to find out that despite not sleeping as many hours as generally recommended, I was getting very high sleep scores. It's actually a bit of contention or just like a funny difference between my husband Jake and I. He'll usually sleep about 2 hours more than me each night, and yet my sleep scores are always higher than his, or unless I really only got 3 hours of sleep. So it's pretty funny to me how that happens, but it does explain why, even though I don't get as much sleep, I'm still able to function very well and I feel very good and vibrant throughout the day. So having that data, I think, can be very helpful in noticing patterns and also observing, what might be going on below the surface here as, you're trying to sleep. Something else that was interesting I found is sometimes if there's nights where I feel like I'm not sleeping at all, it actually told me that I was in light sleep for an hour. So that made me feel a little better knowing, hey, I actually got more sleep than I did. And in a way that can almost be a placebo effect, like, wow, I actually didn't have as much of a sleepless night as I thought. Yay! As you go about the next day. Tip number 3 is to prepare for the next morning the night before. I do work for myself now, so the beauty of that is my schedule is more flexible. But when I was a teacher, this was essential because I tried to sleep into the last possible minute. and got myself ready in like 15 minutes. What steps could you shift from your morning to your evening routine, and could that help you with peace of mind? Sometimes when we are laying there trying to fall asleep, maybe your mind's racing through what you have to do. So if you can plan things ahead, you can limit those tasks. That could include things like preparing or packing your lunch for the next day of work, or your breakfast. Maybe it's laying out your outfit. Maybe it's planning something ahead that was a work task that you can do at night. This is very simple, but something that has given me a lot of peace of mind. Let's say I get an email or I didn't get around to responding to a work email. I'm feeling great, at 2 a.m. when I usually go to bed around 3 to 4 at this time, on average. So I actually use email scheduling tools. So if anyone's getting an email from me at 8 a.m, I'm not up at 8 a.m. I'm scheduling the email to go out then. So what tasks can you do to just get it off your mind, off your plate, so then you don't have to think about it in that morning time? And that reduction of your to-do list tasks can hopefully help lead to peace of mind as you're laying there trying to fall asleep. Tip number 4 is to snack wisely. A lot of sleep experts talk about how it's so important not to be eating before bed, and I totally get that. But if you're a night owl and you're staying up late, you're going to get hungry after dinner. It's just, a matter of fact. And I also know I want to plan ahead for eating snacks, because I don't want to have waited too long and then get really hungry like an hour before bed, because I have found if I'm super hungry before going to bed, it's much harder for me to sleep. So for me, like I said, usually stay up till about 3 or 4. So I will have an actual midnight snack, some food at midnight, or at least between midnight and 1. And that will give me fuel as I continue staying up, but that gives me a couple hours for that food to digest, so it won't be a problem as I'm trying to sleep. I think it's also important to eat something pretty healthy and lighter at this time that's going to be easier to digest. So these are all very random, but a couple things that I enjoy doing for a late night snack. If I'm looking for something a bit lighter, or especially in hot weather, I sometimes do a cup of some frozen mango. It's just in the cubed pieces, let it thaw for a bit, and it's very pleasant, simple snack. Sometimes I'll do like a bowl of Cheerios with maybe some frozen blueberries, just like a simple snack as well. I've actually sometimes made salads. It's kind of random, but I have this really good salad dressing from Trader Joe's. It's a creamy cauliflower dill dressing. Maybe it sounds a little strange, but it's good. Sometimes it might be a rice cake with some peanut butter and a banana on top. It varies, but something pretty simple, light, and that's a great option to keep yourself full as you continue staying up and sort of personalize it to your own needs. And also, I know I'm going to bed very late, but I'm also generally waking up within the 10 o'clock hour, no later than 11. And when I get up, I'm not actually really eating a normal breakfast. So in a way, my midnight snack is kind of like an early breakfast. Tip number 5 is to invest in some blue light glasses. To me, these are a lifesaver and one of my absolute favorite possessions. Now, there's certainly a ton of brands out there of blue light glasses, and they're at different price points. The ones I use, they are the Diffie brand, but they are a higher end brand. I did not pay full price for them, so I just want to, be very clear for that. But I love these. Now, everyone uses them differently. Jake also uses blue light glasses. He uses them all throughout the day whenever he's looking at screens. For me, I don't feel I need them during the day, but around 11 p.m. or so is when I'll start wearing them when looking at screens, which I often am, since I'm often continuing to work in the evening, or maybe we're watching YouTube videos together if my husband Jake hasn't gone to bed yet. So with that in mind, what I love about it is that it reduces eye strain, and the blue light from devices is especially what can keep us awake and prevents us, I don't have the sciencey terms in my brain right now, but can prevent us from maybe naturally producing melatonin or whatever it is that our bodies do. The blue light can interfere with that. And a lot of times people say, oh, stop using devices 2 hours before bedtime. And cool, like good for you if you're able to do that. But for me, I'm on my device so much and I use that evening time as special work hours. So, for me, I wouldn't be staying up if I wasn't on my device. I don't know what I'd really be doing, to be honest. So I think that's not a realistic thing for me to just say, yeah, no devices. But if you use the blue light glasses, that blocks the blue light and then hopefully prevent those negative effects. Tip number 6 is to start your nighttime routine earlier. So with this, you might have a current nighttime routine. Maybe it involves doing a few basic chores around the house, such as doing the dishes from the day. Maybe it involves some entertainment like watching YouTube or watching TV of some sort. Maybe it involves some family time. Maybe it's time just for you. Maybe it's preparations for the next day. Whatever you're doing, we also don't have to necessarily just consider the productive tasks. Just reflect about your evening. And if you are able, start that routine a little bit sooner, which will then give you more time allotted for sleep. So for instance, where this tip really became helpful for me was realizing that I generally stayed up to work 3 hours each night after my husband went to bed. And so if he was going to bed at 2, that meant I was generally going to bed at 5 in the morning, which is definitely less healthy than me going to bed at 3 a.m. So with that in mind, we have realized that pushing our routine a little earlier, that means when we do the dishes, that means when we cut off, watching YouTube videos or whatever, those sort of steps, if we push them earlier, then I'm less likely to stay up as late and will go to bed a little earlier. That means there's also more hours in the night where I can sleep. So with that in mind, if you can push your routine a little earlier and get some of those tasks started sooner, you might find that it's easier to sleep or that you've got more time available. My last tip in this before you sleep section is to dim your lighting as you get closer to bed. So for us, it's not necessarily dimming lighting. You don't need dimmable lighting, but we have different lights that we use as the day progresses. We've got some brighter LED like white light bulbs that we use earlier, such as maybe in the 6, 7, 8 p.m. hours. I know it definitely depends upon the time of year it is. If it's winter, we're needing them much sooner. When it's getting darker, much faster. But then we don't use those lights after a certain point, maybe like after 8, 9 p.m. And then especially if I'm getting close to going to bed, I unplug the main light in my living room here, and I just have little fairy lights on, which to me are much more soothing and calming, and that's a way to gradually help yourself transition for bed. Now let's get into part 2, where we're looking at the specific sleeping environment and what to do when you're actually already trying to sleep. So I think the first thing is to invest in quality bedding for yourself. Reflect about the bedding you like and what you don't like, and consider alternatives. And this could be looking at different pillows that might help you sleep better. It could be looking at temperature control. Is the bedding you're using too hot or too cold? Could you benefit from something more or less than what you currently have? It could be mattress. It could be a lot of different factors, but reflect about where your current pain points are and see if you can make adjustments to that. Tip number 9, it's also important to set boundaries with your bedroom. Now, this is something that's not possible to you. Maybe if you're in college and or have a studio apartment and your bed is in the same space as your other hangout areas. But in general, if we can try to have a separation between just hanging around, watching TV, whatever it is, working versus, the bedroom and where you sleep, then that can make a more clear divide. Okay, I'm going into this space. It's time to wind down, relax. Let's get ready for sleep. So that can be helpful if you can, avoid working in your room or some of the general entertainment you do, if we can keep that out of the bedroom. I think number 10, darkness is so important for sleep. So with that, I swear by using a sleep mask. I've been wearing sleep masks pretty much every night since I was in college, and it helps so much, especially if you're a night owl. Maybe you are sleeping in a little bit later when it's already kind of sunny, and so having that block there is nice. And I also have found, I don't know if there's any science behind this. This is just my own experience, that having just something on top of my eyes helps me keep them closed and not just laying there on the pillow like staring at the ceiling. It's just an added comfort. Maybe it's because I've used the sleep mask for so long, but I really like it. So that's just a helpful thing to think about. And also blackout shades or some sort of drapes that will prevent light from getting into your room. The beauty is when I am waking up even at 10:30 when it's very bright outside, our room is not super bright. So that helps me sleep in longer with my sleep schedule. And also, I know, just connecting these topics, if you've got any like blinking lights and things that flash in your room, if there are certain items that can be covered or the positioning can be changed, even if there's something that you can put in front of them that prevents you from seeing them, or the sleep mask can also be helpful in that regard too. And I've got my alarm clock set to be dim as well, just so we've really removed any excess light. I also find that white noise is very helpful. Now, we used to just use a box fan, but in our current place, since it can get a little colder in the winter, did not want to have a fan on. So this particular white noise machine we've been using, I think for 3 years now, obsessed with it. It's so peaceful. It's just a very generic white noise sound. There is an actual fan inside the unit. And we really love this one, but you can find an option that works for you if that's helpful. And I think this is also nice to have a bit more noise preventing you from hearing, the other person, especially if you're, sharing a room with someone else. That part is nice because genuinely I don't hear when my husband gets up and showers and anything like that. And he also doesn't hear me if I'm out in the main space, like doing a video call with Vera, in the middle of the night, or, at least for my time zone, it's the middle of the night, or filming a tutorial video for an employee. That is something that white noise helps prevent. Tip number 12 is that I choose not to keep my phone in the room. And if we are traveling and it has to be in the room, I put it on airplane mode. So I'm not going to get notifications or calls of any kind while I'm sleeping that could interrupt my sleep. We do find it very beneficial to have an actual alarm clock that we can use, and it actually gets me out of bed to go turn it off each morning. I also like that, there's not the brain waves right there next to me while I'm sleeping. And especially since right now, there's still a lot of like spam and robocalls that happen, I definitely would be very irritated if one of those woke me up. Generally, there haven't been any urgent messages that I get on my phone, so it's nice to have that boundary. Tip number 13 is to keep a journal or notepad by your bedside. For me, if I am laying there and I have an idea, or I'm just even thinking about something that I want to get out of my brain, if I write it down there, then, or even just jot something down about it, it gives me peace of mind to be able to okay, let's try to sleep again. And so that's, I think, a very helpful tool. Now, obviously, the writing is going to be a disaster because you're just there with your eyes closed, or you can't see and you're just trying to write what you can. But for me, if I get those thoughts out of my brain, then I can have a clear mind and settle down for bed. Tip number 14, let's say you've been trying to sleep for a while and it's just not happening for you. In these situations, rather than continuing to lay there and hope that I'm going to fall asleep, even though I'm becoming less tired the more I lay there, I say, okay, you know what? It's not going to happen right now. I get up, I do something else for an hour or two. Now, when this happens, it's obviously a bummer because you tried to go to bed at a more reasonable time and it just didn't work. For me, this still happens sometimes, especially if I try to go to bed earlier. Like if I try to go to bed at midnight or 1 or something, this does often happen. But it's just kind of part of, maybe having insomnia or with being a night owl. And I find that saying, okay, you know what, let's try again later, takes some of that pressure off. You don't get as worked up about it. Do something else for an hour or two, depending on when you feel tired, and then try it again, almost as if it's a new night. Yes, you're not going to get as much sleep as you would, but if I'm going to be awake, I'd much rather be doing something and, having a nice time than just laying there frustrated. So that's something that I have found to be helpful. And lastly, kind of piggybacking off that last tip, if you are having one of these tough nights where you're not able to fall asleep, try not to beat yourself up. I've been there. You're just so frustrated. Why can't I fall asleep? But with these situations, the more worked up we get doesn't help us, as well as the more frequent, like looking at the clock. So in addition to trying to, be kind to yourself when this happens, it might be helpful to actually turn the clock so you can't see it, or put a post-it over the clock if you need to, and just to say, hey, you know what, like reflection, this is going to be okay. This is not going to be, my best night of sleep, but even if I just get a couple hours, like that's better than nothing. I don't have to stress out about this, so much that I keep myself worked up. And if you need to, obviously every situation is different. If you're able to take the day off from work the next day, or make some adjustments to have a more low-key day the next day, you can do that. I know there was one day of teaching where I tried for my sleep schedule wasn't that crazy then. I was trying to go to bed by 1, had to wake up at 6:45. And for whatever reason, I just could not sleep. It was like 6 a.m. and I hadn't fallen asleep yet. And I was so worked up about it. And finally I just said, you know what? I'm just going to take the day off here and call in sick, because I am not going to be very good in the classroom if I didn't sleep at all. And after making that decision, calling it in, letting go of that stress and pressure, I was actually able to fall asleep, and maybe I woke up at like 10 or something. So I kind of salvaged that by giving myself that grace and allowing myself to, push past some of those negative feelings. Obviously, that's not something that's always possible in a lot of jobs and whatnot, but if there are opportunities where you can give yourself that grace and not try to beat yourself up, I think that's very huge. I know this ended up being a longer video than I planned, but I have a lot of thoughts as a night owl, insomniac, workaholic. But I hope this was helpful, especially if you're a fellow night owl, or even if you're just looking for some ways to optimize your sleep. If you liked this video and want to see some other ones, I'll put them here, and you can feel free to subscribe to the channel up here. I'll see you next time. Bye.